Hi there. Thank you so much for being here. Today I'm sharing a trio of encouragement cards featuring Unity stamps and some soft watercoloring with Distress watercolor pencils. I'll show you two different methods to use them and why one has become my go-to. And then we'll put everything together with simple layouts and a fun bonus card using up the scraps. So let's get started and assemble these cards. To begin, I'm going to start by watercoloring these beautiful florals. This is a new stamp set from Unity Stamp Company called Serenity Circle, where hope begins again. It's part of their In the Light series, which kind of highlights mental illness, addiction, or anyone going through a struggle, or those supporting others going through a struggle. Everybody needs encouragement cards, and I just feel like this line of stamps is so different and unique and so heartfelt. So I've stamped both of these beautiful cone flowers on some cardstock. This is cream cardstock from the Paper Studio, which is Hobby Lobby's line. It's actually a very heavyweight cardstock, 80 pounds, and it handles the water beautifully. I have my Distress watercolor pencils, and I'm using method number 1. If you have watched my channel for any amount of time and seen me watercolor with pencils before, you know I like to pick it up from the pencil and then apply it directly to the paper. Using a water brush. You could use a regular paintbrush with water as well. You just want to make sure that you keep your water as minimum as possible. You don't need a lot. You need just enough to melt that waxy pigment and then apply it to the paper. I've also stamped in some water-friendly ink. This is Gina K Amalgam ink in Chocolate Truffle. So to use the direct from pencil method, I take my water brush, I just rub it across that pencil until it starts to melt and get wet, and then I use that pigment and place it down onto my stamped image. If I get too much on my water brush, I'll wipe that away on a baby wipe, or like I just did, I wiped it away with my finger. You have a bit of time with these. They're kind of waxy, kind of crayon-like, but still watercolorish, not full crayon. So they're very unique, and they're very easy to blend and layer, and they work really well on cardstock. It's a great medium to try on cardstock. It's just really friendly compared to regular inks or regular watercolor paints. These kind of sit on top a little bit more and blend a little easier. And then between each color, I will wipe my brush off to make sure that it's nice and clean, and then I'll just pick up my next color and move on. So for the flower tops, the petals were mustard seed and then fossilized amber, and then I added a hint of aged mahogany. And then for the coneflower centers was rustic hinge and then a little bit of aged mahogany. And then now I'm moving on to the stems, which is peeled paint and bundled sage. And my method is to do a bit of a stippling motion. You'll see me just kind of poke the paper with my brush so I don't get these long strokes. For me, that builds up texture and that pigment kind of really stays in place. If I want to spread it out, I can, and then I'll come back and kind of stipple on top of that. That kind of really builds up the vibrancy of the pigment in the shadows, and it creates a lot of variation without a lot of effort. So that's my preferred method. And what I'll do is after it kind of sits a little bit and kind of soaks into the paper, if I need to kind of build it up and make it a little bit more bright or a little bit more of a shadow, I'll come back in and add another layer. So that's what I'm doing now. That coneflower kind of dried a little bit and got a little flat. So I'm just adding a little bit more of that aged mahogany to create a little bit more dimension. And that finishes this one off. So I'm just going to set it aside and let it dry a little bit before I do anything more. For method number 2, this is direct to paper. So I take the pencil and I draw it directly onto the paper, and then I'm going to take my paintbrush and just kind of smooth that out in strokes. This is actually a great method to do if you have a large area that you want to cover. And then I'll come back in with my next layer of color, and this one I'm going to do from pencil. I'm going to pick it up from the pencil just because when I try to draw pencil onto wet, it doesn't transfer very well. If I wanted to do that, I would have to let this completely dry, draw it on, and then I could spread it out. Those little petals were too small for me to do the same method that I'm doing for the coneflower tops, where I do both tones at the same time. So I did the rusty hinge towards the top, which is the lighter color, and then aged mahogany towards the bottom for the shadow. And then I'm just going to wet that, and I'm using a mixture of my stippling technique and then brush strokes. And see how that really blends together smooth. Like there's no variation so much, they just kind of blend all together and kind of create almost one color. So that's what the biggest difference is when you draw to paper than picking up with the pencils. We can't get that big of a definition because those two colors are both wet and they want to blend together. Now, it's not a bad technique. It's useful in many situations, but I am a bit of a lazy colorer. I like to get things done quickly and with the least amount of effort. And this to me is going to require another layer of color. It's pretty, but it's not as vibrant and interesting as our first method. See the variations of color? The one we just did is kind of flat. And so I'd prefer to get my most bang for my buck with doing direct from pencil rather than direct to paper. So we're going to fix this one because I don't want to waste these flowers. I could use them as is. Like I said, they're not horrible. I would just like to have another layer of vibrant color. And these have dried well enough that I can add a second layer of color. And I'm going to use my first method, the direct from pencil, just because I know that this is going to create a nice concentrated layer of color and it will stay where I put it. All I'm going to do is go back over the same areas that I did before and just kind of build it up. Now, what's lovely is that combining these two methods is gorgeous. I mean, you get a nice lower level of color, and then you can come in and really bump up the color by adding a second or third layer of pigment. And it really becomes more vibrant, more depth of color. You could really go with shadow and creating like contrast with different undercolors, all sorts of things. I am truly amazed at the artists out there that take the time to do that. Like I said, I'm a bit more of a lazy colorist, so I just like to get most bang for my buck and I'll stop with that first method. And here it is fixed in my eyes. I just feel like it's closer to our first attempt. And really you can kind of see how those layers together really kind of makes it pop even more. So once those are dry, we're going to go ahead and move on and create our cards. I'm just going to fussy cut each of these out. Unity does not have dies for these at the moment, maybe sometime in the future, but there is a digital die cut. If you have a digital die cut machine, you can always purchase that. I love to fussy cut, so I'm just going to fussy cut these out, leaving a bit of a border around them. And here they are, all cut out. Aren't they a lovely size? I just love how big they are. Next, I stamped some craft cardstock with the inked intention background using some Gina K ink in craft. And then I grabbed a stencil from my stash. I believe this one's retired, but you could just pick anything that you love, you might have in your stash. I just really like this floral. And then I grabbed some light modeling paste and I'm just going to place that through my stencil. I love the light modeling paste. It has a bit of a sandy texture and it's also a bit translucent while still being a nice white. I just kind of felt like it was soft and dreamy and kind of went with the whole theme of the card. While I had those supplies out, I did 3 backgrounds so I could do 3 cards. And then once I was done stenciling, I'm just going to set them aside and let them dry. Once they were dry, I'm going to mount these on some cream cardstock, the same cardstock that I watercolored the flowers on, just so it's a bit cohesive. I'm using liquid glue just because that paste is kind of thick, and so I want to make sure I get a nice adhesion. And then I grabbed some papers from the Hey There paper pack and die cut 2 little postage stamp dies. I did a bunch of them because, again, I didn't really know what I wanted to use for all 3 cards, so I just kind of did 3 for each card in between the 2 different designs, and I'll kind of mix and match as I go along. For this first one, I did a trio, 2 in the top and then 1 in the bottom corner. And again, I'm using that liquid adhesive because that modeling paste is a bit sandy and textured, so I want to make sure that these stick well. And just going to line those up, and I hold them in place just a little bit to make sure that that glue really grabs on. And then I'm going to pop up my flower. I added some foam tape to the top and the leaves, and then I'm just going to glue down the base. That will create a bit of dimension so it's not so flat on the card. And then I stamped my sentiment from the stamp set, added a little paper clip with some string tied on to the end. I just thought that was really cute. And then I'm just going to put that in the bottom corner of the card right on top of that flower stem. Perfect. And then one more little element, I have this old paper punch. It's from Martha Stewart, I believe. And so I just punched out some little butterflies, and I'm going to put all 3 on this card, I think. Just kind of fills in those empty spaces, adds a little bit of movement, and these little punches were gathering some dust, so I thought I'd pull them out. I thought it'd be a fun thing to add and use for my stash that I haven't used in quite a long time. So I'm just gluing down the center of the butterfly. I'm using the scissors to hold it down and allow that glue to really grab and hold, and then I can lift up their wings. Cute. So for the second card, I'm using all the same things again. I just did a different mix of pattern paper die cuts, just 2 up top this time, and then I cut a banner sentiment from the stamp set, added another paper clip with some string, and then putting that down at the base of the flower. As I move along, you'll see me use maybe 1 or 2 less elements per card. It's just a great way to use up those pieces that you kind of die cut. Like the butterfly comes in 3s, so for this card I'm using 2, and that leaves 1 for the next card, and that finishes up card number 2. And here's a look at card number 3. I just kind of changed the layout a little bit, put 2 of those die cuts in the bottom corner with 1 butterfly that I had left over, die cut another sentiment, this time with an arch, just for something a little different. And then looking at all my scraps, I had that big piece of green paper with the butterflies cut out from the bottom. So I'm using that piece, covering it up with some torn strips of pattern paper, using up my last flower, and then added another sentiment. This one is the simplest, but still lovely. Thank you so much for hanging in till the end. I hope this video inspires you to try something new. It's really amazing how a few supplies and simple techniques can come together to create something beautiful. Whether you love layered and detailed designs or quick and simple cards, there's so much possibility with just a little bit of time and creativity. Supplies are listed below or at my dollhouse-designs.com blog. Thank you for creating with me today. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so we can craft together again soon in the next video. Bye!